Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. Wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, as always, thank you guys so much for the support, the kind messages, everything that you've sent this show's way. Really do appreciate it. I read all those emails, read all those tweets, read all those messages, and I love getting your guys' feedback. So keep that coming. And of course, thank you so much for joining us here for this episode. Today, we're going to be focusing a lot on leadership. I know that that's such a hot button topic and something that coaches are always looking to improve upon or get new ideas on. And what we're going to be talking about today is specifically the concept of leadership by example. And we're going to talk about leadership in terms of building leadership in your players, how to have a program that values creating leaders, and of course, as coaches, what coaches are doing to develop their own leadership skills and become the best leaders they can be for their players as well as talk about how leadership gets into the actual basketball sides of things in terms of execution. So we're going to cover a whole lot of different things involving leadership, but I know you're going to get a lot out of this, and I'm really excited to get into this with my guest, who is the head women's basketball coach at Chandler Gilbert Community College. Very happy to be joined by Coach Fletcher Brown today. Coach, really appreciate you being able to come on and spend some time talking to us. How are things going?
Everything is going well here. Everything is going well, and I appreciate you for allowing me to speak with you guys today and being able to promote Chandler Gilbert women's basketball and talk a little bit about things that I'm passionate about: leadership, women's basketball, and thank you.
Awesome. Coach, let's go ahead and get started with your basketball journey, your coaching journey. Where is this game of basketball taking you that ultimately led to Chandler Gilbert?
Wow, there's a lot behind that.
A lot going on.
Yeah. I grew up in San Francisco, and I kind of was basically a walk-on at a local junior college. I played for 2 seasons at Contra Costa Community College, which is across the water in San Pablo. Miguel Johnson was our head coach there. And I reached out to him towards the end of my senior year, just asking for an opportunity. And he said, "Hey, why don't you come by open gym and see how it goes?" And I went to open gym. It went well. And then just showed up, started showing up every day and working out. And next thing you know, I earned a spot on the team. So I wasn't really like a highly sought after recruit. I wasn't a McDonald's All-American or anything like that. I was really kind of a walk-on guy, and ended up playing 2 years there, 2 pretty successful seasons, earned a spot to the University of Maine at Fort Kent, where I played my junior and senior year. Had a really wonderful experience there under Tom Bird. Got to see a lot of the country, got to play with guys from all over the world. So that was really rewarding. Ended up having a couple of things go sideways with how my credits transferred from one college to the other. So I ended up having to be in school for another year, which at first kind of was a real disappointment. I was pretty bummed out, but that was my first real great lesson in leadership or in life. Like, sometimes when things ain't going right, there's a silver lining. There's some sort of positive that you can take from a negative situation. And Coach Bird asked if I wanted to stick around and basically be his assistant coach. And I said yes, because I wanted to get in coaching. I wanted to remain around the game. I just didn't exactly know where I was going to, in what capacity that was going to be in. And we ended up having a really successful season as the assistant men's basketball coach there. We beat a Division I basketball team in an exhibition game. So, and I threw myself into all of the tasks that a full-time assistant would do. I was recruiting. I was, working out the guys, a lot of player development. I was helping Coach Bird with scheduling and a lot of administrative things, budget oversight, things like that. And then I guess we had a strong enough season that at the conclusion of that year, our athletic director asked if I'd be interested in taking over the women's program because there was a transition in leadership going on there. And after a couple conversations with him, I accepted that position. I was there for 3 seasons at Fort Kent as the head women's basketball coach, and then another year kind of with COVID and pandemic, didn't have a season. But then I wanted to see what else was out there and explore different parts of the country and kind of just wanted to get out of Maine. I was a student there and then I'd been working there. So I wanted to see what else was out there for me. And I was fortunate to get the job here at Chandler Gilbert Community College. And fast forward 3 years later, we're building something special, and I'm excited about the direction our program is heading.
I imagine the travel situation during basketball season is probably a little more pleasant for you out here in the Phoenix area than it was in Maine. I imagine some of the situations you faced with, it's pretty pleasant having basketball season in the winter here in the Phoenix area.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. It's what is it? 65 degrees right now in December, and it's probably, I don't know, 25 degrees or below that back in Maine. No snow, no snowstorms holding us up on the
Oh
interstate.
goodness. Yeah, the bus trying to
No,
warm up and the ice everywhere.
yeah, no need to
Yeah.
chip ice off the bus and the van to get in there, and you don't have to walk into gyms with
That's
800 jackets on and
oh
boots.
man.
Yeah, no, it's
Yep, yep.
a pleasant change.
So let me ask you about the thought process you had about getting into the women's side. What was that like? What were your thoughts about it? You dive right in. Did you have any sort of apprehension at all? What was your thoughts as you started to step into the women's coaching role when that position had opened up?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was, towards my senior year and during my year as an assistant coach, coaching women's basketball was never something that even crossed my mind. Like I never envisioned myself working with young women. I never envisioned myself coaching women's basketball or training, young women athletes. Just something that wasn't even on my radar. I paid attention to women's basketball because somebody actually told me a long time ago, like if you really want to get a great handle on the fundamentals of the game, you should be watching women's basketball. So I watched a lot of UConn games growing up and Notre Dame women's basketball games growing up, and our women's basketball team when I was in Maine was pretty good. They were exciting, so I was always tapped in with them. But when the opportunity presented itself, I was hesitant, and then our athletic director and it was really our assistant athletic director, who is a great guy, Lucas Levesque. He was assistant AD and women's soccer coach, and he had a lot of success. And he was just kind of a guy like me. I mean, obviously a little bit older, but he's just a laid back guy. Initially got into coaching, men's soccer, and he just said, there's really a lot of benefit to this. You could really excel with coaching young women. And it could be really rewarding. It could be a lot of fun. It's a great way to serve. And that's kind of what got me to take the position. And yeah, there was those first couple of years I learned a lot really through the mistakes that I made. And
Yeah.
but at the same time, I was fortunate to have some young women that were very mature. They kind of understood, like, hey, this guy really knows the game, but he might not necessarily understand the different dynamics between coaching men's basketball and coaching women's basketball. They were pretty patient with me. And then at times they were not afraid to tell me when I was messing up. So I really give kudos to them. And just like in anything else, like you're gonna fail a couple times, you're gonna trip over yourself a couple times, but if you want something and you want to be good at it, like you're not going to let that get in your way. So I still don't have it all figured out, but I like to think I'm getting there after whatever it is, 7 or 8 years now.
Yeah, that's great. I really wanted to give you the platform to talk about that as someone who personally champions of women's basketball and encourages so many people to get into it. I wanted to make sure I asked you that specifically, and I totally understand that apprehension, but it's to me it's such a great experience and like you talked about, like the fundamentals of the game and the way that you kind of teach the game and on that fundamental level, especially in that opportunity to make a difference in young women's lives. No, that's incredible. So I'm glad you were able to share that. Before we get into the topic at hand, I did want to talk about accountability because I know that that's something that is also a passion of yours. I wanted to kind of ask you in a general sense, what does that actually look like for your program? How are players, how are coaches, how is everyone kind of held accountable to whatever the standards are at your program at Chandler Gilbert?
But at Chandler Gilbert, that's a tough one, and we've had a lot of open and honest discussions
Hmm.
as a team about what that means. I told the team, and I told every team that I've coached at the beginning of the season, like, you guys are adults. We want to treat you like adults. We have an expectation that you're going to come in and do the right things, be on time, operate with a high level character, uh, operate with autonomy, that sort of thing. And for the most part, that's been the case. Of course, every now and again, somebody's going to be a little bit late, and somebody might be having a rough day, and they let that get the better of them. And we really encourage our team to be a player led team, because we feel that a player-led team is going to go much further than simply a coach-led team.
Mm,
One thing that we do is we shout out model behavior. We shout out people who are consistently the first people there, who are consistently taking care of business in the classroom and on the court. So we encourage the behavior that we want to see, and so far that's worked fairly well. But that's a tough one. Ultimately, accountability is like, that's super important, because the in the real world, when you become an adult, in life after college, in life after basketball, if you don't hold yourself accountable to getting things done, like, it's not
yeah.
it's not going to work. So we try and teach them these things in a gentle way, where they still have a safety net, and they're allowed to make mistakes, and they're allowed to uh again, kind of like I said, fall on their face a couple of times, and not have it be the end of the world, and let them know, like, hey, if this is something that's consistent in your lifestyle, you might want to get this figured out sooner rather than later, before it really, really costs you when you're 25, when you're 30, whatever it is. So it's a tough one to get through to people, but that's part of our jobs as coaches, is to serve and provide these valuable lessons to them.
Yeah, and you kind of have the interesting dynamic, I would think of, the players that are coming into you at a community college level, that they're adults, and like you mentioned, you want to kind of want to treat them like adults, and you want to hold them to the standards that you would hold an adult to. But as you also mentioned, at the same time, they're still in the process of coming into their own, into adulthood, and they're not fully developed, fully autonomous, independent on their own adults. And so you kind of have to, as you kind of talked about, right, strike that balance between like wanting to let them fail, have them be adults, but also understand, right, they're not exactly a finished product yet either.
Yeah, no, and that's the biggest challenge that we've faced in the last couple years. I think it's been especially difficult for me personally, because when I was coaching in Maine for 3 seasons, all of our players were junior college transfers. So they were at least 20, 21 years old. Some of the players that we had redshirted for a season, or gotten hurt for a season or two. So they
Mm,
were even older than that. So they came to us, and they got it. They didn't need a lesson in accountability. They didn't need a lesson in being on time. You didn't have to police them as much. They just kind of came in and took care of business. Where now that I'm at the community college level, the players are right out of high school, and maybe their high school coach didn't hold them to a certain high standard because they were naturally the best player, or maybe they were afraid of losing their job, or whatever it is. So we've had to teach a few people some lessons in accountability, and letting them know, like, there is a consequence to your actions if you choose not to police yourself, if you choose to not put the team first, if you choose not to respect kind of our larger team expectations. And Uh, I was actually talking with one of our former players in Maine. I was just catching up with her the other day, and she's like, "How's your team doing? How are the attitudes on your team?" I said, everything is pretty good. I said we have one or two players that they were kind of like you, Renika, back when you first started, like late a couple times, didn't quite understand the rules. She said, "Well, you might have to do them like you did me, mop ups until they figure it out." And I got a good laugh out of that, because sometimes you got to bust out the mop up, the consequence, the towel push. But
Yeah.
after a couple rounds of that, you figure it out pretty quick. Like, yeah, I should probably be on time.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
and I think that's a great point too that you mentioned, is that you don't know to what level these players have ever really been held accountable, but before they even come to you. And so, some of these players who may have had, special treatment or preferential treatment just because of their skill set, like you said, maybe need a little bit of a readjustment or a little bit of a wake up call as to what's expected at the next level. So, that's
exactly.
kind of all part of that process, right? Of the maturity and everything, for sure. Um, Speaking of which, as we kind of talk about the idea of kind of leading by example, I wanted to first ask about what do you look for in terms of a player's leadership skills or leadership ability or potential, rather, maybe even when they're even coming to Chandler Gilbert? Well, what should they already have been demonstrating before they even come, and as they're being recruited on the leadership front, by the time they even get to your program? What leadership skills should they already have?
I think the leadership skills that they should demonstrate is, are they walking the walk as well as talking the talk? Because it's easy to, when you know that a college coach is watching you in this game or this practice, it's easy to be that energy person, that encouraging teammate, the high five guy, the pick people up when they're down teammate. It's easy to be that when somebody's looking for that. But are they doing that in practice every single day? Are they doing that when their team is losing? Are they doing that when they're playing a team that is one of the better teams in the state, and it's a close game or they're losing? Are they doing it on a consistent basis, even when I'm not watching or other coaches aren't watching? It's really about just being honest in your approach to being a leader, just being authentic, and being consistent in it. Those are the things that we look for.
Yeah, and it's so funny to hear you say that, because I've had a lot of people kind of mention about, the way that almost like you act when like nobody's watching, or when your eyes aren't on you, sort of thing, right? Like, what do you do when maybe you don't think anyone's on you? I've had players who I've kind of told that to, about, everything that they do is kind of being looked at and recruited the way that they are on the bench, the way they are when they're warming up. Like, it's all like, if that leadership isn't there, or they're not showing that, it's going to pop up at some point. And if you're not on it, then it's going to be recognized right away if you don't have that skill, or you're not showing that, and it will pop up, is what I tell them.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. There's some quote out there like, your character is what you are when nobody's watching, or what you do when nobody's watching, something like that. And you got to be consistent in being a leader no matter what. Like, maybe you're having a bad day and you failed a test earlier in the day, or you got broken up with or something. Like, are you still going to come to practice and be that person that who holds people accountable, who's bringing the energy, who's motivating, who's working their butt off regardless of what's going on outside? That's important for us as well.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so now, as they come into your program now, and as you start to work with them, and as you start to work them into your program, how do you build those leadership skills? How do you kind of build them up to where they're reflecting the core values of your program? How do you work on bringing the leadership out of them?
That's another really really difficult task,
Yeah.
especially at our program, considering we really only have these players for 2 seasons.
Sure.
And if they don't come in with like natural leadership ability, or they haven't had a coach who's encouraged them to be a leader, it's going to take half the season or 2/3 of the season to get them to get it figured out, and then you only got one more season of it. So that's the challenge for us. But we encourage everybody on our team to be a leader, and we encourage everybody to be a motivator, to hold each other accountable, to hold themselves accountable. And I have a lot of one-on-one meetings with each of the players on our team, and I don't tell everybody we encourage everybody to be a leader, but then there's people that we specifically, the coaches kind of identify like, hey, this person is a great student. They're demonstrating all of our core values every day, which are respect, honesty, attitude, and effort. And we want to encourage them to speak up in practice, to be vocal in the locker room, to they're so far they're walking the walk, so we encourage them to talk the talk. And that player doesn't necessarily need to be our leading scorer. It doesn't need to be a starter. It doesn't need to be our MVP. It's the person that has the respect of the locker room, who has the trust of the coaches, and who the coaches have kind of identified like, hey, she's bringing it every day. She's consistent. We really want to encourage this person to be a quote unquote a captain or a leader for us, because they're checking all the boxes.
When you talk about those one-on-one meetings, what are those like when you're having those conversations? What sort of topics or things do you bring up? Does it change week to week, or what are those conversations like with your players?
It really varies. It varies. The root of those they're bi-weekly with each player. They have a designated time that they've set up in a calendar, and they know when it is and all that good stuff. The root of those meetings was really to check their grades. So we have a software all the coaches have a software on our computer that gives us a breakdown of each player's grades. So we kind of start the conversation with that. Depending on the student athlete, sometimes our entire conversation is about their grades. Sometimes our conversation about their grades is for about 10 seconds because they're doing pretty good. And then we'll just really spend that time getting to know each other, building that relationship, because ultimately that's kind of what it's all about is strong relationships. Sometimes we're watching film on the last game, like, hey, here's 3 or 4 clips of things that you did really well. We want to see more of this. Or, hey, here's 3 or 4 clips of things that, we talk about in practice that you haven't quite gotten right. Let's break this down and see how we can fix it. Maybe we'll watch some film on, hey, here's who you're guarding tomorrow. You're going to keep her left, or she's going to spin back right, whatever it is. Now that we are really have players in our program who we've worked hard to recruit, we have good relationships with their families. So I'm always checking in, how's mom, how's dad? A lot of our players have brothers and sisters that come to the games and who were along for the ride during their recruiting visit. So just asking how they're doing. And everybody's got something going on. And I want the office to be a place where they feel comfortable telling me what's going on in their lives, whether it's good or bad. And especially early in the season, September, October, November, I'm finding things out about people that I wouldn't have known if you only spend, the 2 hours working with them at practice. We got people that really love chess and really love scary movies and really have passions for baking and cooking and beading and all types of things. And it's like, man, I probably would have never known this.
Yeah.
I just spent the 10
great.
hours a week coaching them in basketball. So the one-on-one meetings are important. They're a big part of what we do. And they've been beneficial for us.
Yeah, not a lot of conversations, I don't think, taken about movies or bacon during practices and whatnot. I don't know if that naturally comes up too much. So yeah, those one-on-ones too. No, that's great. I think that it's so valuable for just your players to just have those relationships. I think there's just so much you can do with your players when they have that trust and you have that strong relationship with them. And I think that's really awesome that you have that scheduled time with them. Let me ask about the coaching staff in terms of leadership. What are the expectations out of your own leadership for yourself, for your coaching staff? What do you expect for you as a coach when it comes to being a leader by example?
That we expect the coaches to demonstrate the same core values that we have built our program on. Again, those are respect,
Mm-hmm.
honesty, attitude, effort. Our assistant coaches are part-time, and they're largely here just at practice and at games. That's just the nature of our department and our school. We don't have full-time assistant coaches that are on campus. But we just the biggest thing that I ask from our assistants is to be there for the players. Be there to talk with them, connect with them, encourage them, be a sounding board, be a shoulder to cry on. Just be there for them. I don't really ask too many administrative tasks from them just because I know they got full-time jobs outside of this, and they're taking time away from their families and their lives to help us out and work with our players. So yeah, just be there for them, and that's like the biggest thing.
Yeah, and I imagine that gets a little tricky, right? By having part time, it's you have to really kind of imagine have to really maximize everything that you got out of those coaches when you have them, and also make sure that they're seen as, also leaders, and make sure that they're having still those like strong relationships with your players, and making sure that they have build those connections. But I imagine that that gets a little tricky with the limited time that they have available to be with the program.
Yeah, they're in a tough spot a
Yeah,
little bit, just because the players they see me every day.
yeah,
I'm
can't
there.
escape you.
Exactly. I'm in the office early and I'm staying late, so I'm always there. Whereas our assistants, they're really just there around practice. But I encourage our assistants to, during the time that we're going through our dynamic warm up, during the time when people are shooting around or working on their game before and after practice, like just go strike up a conversation. Just see how somebody's doing. Uh, Check in with them, kind of like our one-on-one meetings that we would have, but yours is elevator style. You
Yeah,
got,
yeah, yeah. 30
45
second
seconds to a
pitch.
minute. Yeah, just go and check in with them, and even those small interactions can really go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. How has your leadership style, how has it changed or adapted over the years? Has it been pretty consistent, or have there been evolutions to your own leadership style throughout the years of coaching?
I think I think now I'm a little bit more of a disciplinarian, even though that I don't really like to use that word. I'm still fairly laid back. Again, we talk to our players about policing themselves, holding themselves to a certain expectation, operating with that, autonomy. But working with a younger population, working with a population of student athletes that really has gone through a lot and kind of been given a lot. I think either through the pandemic or this what's that? Everybody gets a trophy kind of thing. It's just a different population. So I found myself being a little bit more of a disciplinarian, which again that's not the right word. Just I'm a little bit stricter.
A
I'm
little
a
more
little
firm. I don't know.
Yeah, a little bit more firm. Whereas my first couple of years, I just had so many. We had so many older players. We had so many players that really didn't need somebody being firm with them. They kind of just got with the program right off the bat, and I was lucky. I was kind of spoiled in that way. So, but I'm still pretty laid back. We can have a conversation about anything. We can laugh. We can dance to music while we're working our way into the gym. But once that practice time hits and we step between the lines, even back then and now, I'm all business. I'm ready to
Yeah,
get to work.
yeah. they can see that human side of you, and I think that's super important, right? They see the you, and they know you for those one-on-ones or the conversations that you know can have before practice or anything. But then they also know like when it's time to get to work, they also know like, all right, the switch is going to be flipped, and then it's business time, so to speak.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And it takes some people a little while to figure that out, but that's an important thing. Our AD with my AD was talking to us about that the other day. He heard it from Coach K, like the flipping the switch, like exactly like you mentioned. Like if I was this disciplinarian, firm, tight dude, 24 hours a day, like I would get worn out.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to keep up.
Yeah, no, it's impossible. So I got to kind of save it for the 2 or 3 hours that we're working, because if not, that first thing is I don't think people would really respect that. That wouldn't be
Mm,
authentic. That wouldn't be me.
yeah.
And it would wear me out. So yeah, no, flipping that switch,
Mm.
that's a great way to
And,
put it.
and yeah, and it just sounds like a miserable way to be for me personally as well. I don't know. I don't think I'd enjoy coaching that much if that's how I had to be all the time. I don't think I'd get
Right.
much out of that at that point. Yeah. Um,
Exactly.
Speaking of practice, I did want to ask about how are your practices structured? How do your practices kind of build and kind of bring out your players' leadership skills with the things that you do in practice? And kind of in a general sense, what do you think coaches maybe can implement or put into their practices so that they're bringing out those leaders and developing those leadership skills while also working on all the basketball things they need to do?
So something that we started doing recently that has really turned around our practices is up until this point I never showed the team the practice plan. Back when I was playing, we were going to do whatever the coach said we were going to do, and we were going to do it as hard as we could. But a little bit different now for whatever reason. But recently, and this is the first year that I've done this, and it's not like I don't have any problem with them seeing the practice plan, but people were really curious, like, hey, what are we doing today? And I would say, well, here it is. Here's the plan. And now they know what we're doing. They know how long we're going to be in there for, if everything goes according to plan. And we'll finish our warm up, we'll finish getting stretched, and I'll say, okay, what are we doing? What's up? What's first? And that's when the leaders really come out and say, hey, okay, 3-man weave or shell drill, and I'll say, all right, hey, Stephanie, what's next? She'll say, oh, we're doing our shooting drill next. And now instead of me directing traffic for 2 hours and clapping all the time and getting them going and getting them hustling from one side to the other, now it's on them. Now it's on them to do that. And that's really been a super positive change that we've seen in the last couple of weeks. I mean, we just started doing this a couple of weeks ago, and it's really transformed our practices. And kind of one of those things where I'm kicking myself like, geez, maybe this is something that should have been done years ago. And I'm not sure if other coaches have done this. I didn't. This is not like any sort of earth-shattering new revelation or anything. It seems like a pretty low-hanging fruit thing to me, but it's worked so far, and it's been a positive change.
Do they ask like questions about like the rationale behind why they're doing something or the purpose of something? Or have they gotten to that point of inquiring about that sort of thing, or they just like to know like what it is, so they just know what's going on?
I think some just want to know what they're getting themselves into, and some are really curious. Like, what is this? How does this relate? And I got no problem. I got no problem telling them. I think that the players that we're working with now in 2023, they've always had so much information at their fingertips that they want to know why for everything. If they
Yeah.
wanted to know about something, they can just Google it on their phone and they know the answer in 5 seconds. So they want to know why. And it's important that the coaches, we got to know why we're doing
Hmm.
certain drills. Why are we doing this passing drill? Well, because we turned it over 30 times yesterday. Or why are we doing shell drill every day? Well, we emphasize defense. We want to be a great half court defensive team, so that's why we do shell drill every single day. And if you can tell them why, I think that really goes a long way too.
Yeah, and you're 100% right, I would say, about players, and just I think kids in general wanting to know like the rationale behind something because they're curious and they want to know like what is it that they were doing. And I think to your point, right, as coaches, there we shouldn't really have to feel like we have to hide our practice plans or anything like that. Like if anything, I think it should be great that our players want to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. Like I think as coaches, we should encourage them to ask about it or ask questions about it because I mean that's such a great thing for buy-in to see like the excitement and the questioning and the wondering and the figuring out the reason behind something. I mean, as a coach, like I would love that.
Yeah, and the ones that are inquisitive, use a SAT word in this
Very
big
nice, very
podcast.
nice.
The ones that are inquisitive, you know those are the ones that they want to get better. They're really invested in this. Not to say that the ones that aren't curious don't care as much, but the ones that are like really really locked in on what we're trying to do, that's how you know like all right, this person they want this.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And those I mean, I think even just that asking of questions, like as you said, and just wanting to know like that in and of itself like brings out leadership because like who are the people who want to take charge and take ownership of what's going on and get a better understanding of it and kind of be like as you kind of mentioned, almost like those coaches on the floor who know exactly like what we're doing and why we're doing it and be able to transition easily from one thing to the next. Like, oh, those are your leaders right there.
And that's how the game goes. We don't have 50 timeouts. Things are going to change rapidly in the game. The momentum is going to shift in one play. The game is going to change. The style is going to change from one quarter to the next. So it's on them to be able to rally their own troops and say, hey, things are changing. We gotta transform a little bit. We gotta adjust. And again, that's us trying to encourage a player-led team.
Awesome. And are there just to continue on to the practice part, are there drills, are there things that you do in your practices that allow your players to kind of take control and take initiative on the court in terms of the types of drills, the types of things that you're working on? How does kind of leadership kind of manifest itself like within the actual drills and practice itself?
Um, I think most of our drills, we try and make most, if not all of our drills competitive, whether that's against the other team or against the clock. We got to get a certain number in this amount of time, and we try and take a hands off approach. The coaches try and take not a hands off approach, but we try and stay quiet, especially when like there's 30 seconds left, for example, in some shooting drill, and we need 10 more. Like I know we need 10 more. The assistant coaches, we know we need 10 more. But do the players realize that? Like, so
Hmm.
we just, after the first couple times that they don't get it, then we ask them, like, hey, what do we think can change here? What do we need to improve upon? What adjustments do we need to make? And we ask them and we say, well, that's on you guys. You guys got
Yeah.
to get this figured out amongst yourselves. And I think making the drills competitive, making them realize like, hey, if we gotta work together. We've got to be vocal with one another. We've got to be communicating. We've got to be on the same page. Everybody's got to pull their weight in order for us to get this done. It kind of creates that culture of like everybody holding themselves accountable. And the leaders will emerge from there, especially after you don't get it a couple times or you lose a couple times. Like
Hmm.
people are just naturally going to get competitive, and you see who speaks up from those moments.
Yeah, and no, I 100% agree with you, and I think that that's also an interesting point that you just brought up is the way in terms of the way that your players respond to a win or they respond to a loss and the way that their body language is and the way that they react and the way that they kind of interact with their teammates after each situation. I think that I know for me, especially as I kind of work to like develop leaderships, I think that one of the hardest things I know I've kind of always experienced as a coach was trying to help my players kind of keep keep level-headed and not get too high on a win or too low on a loss, and kind of keep themselves kind of going from one day to the next, kind of at the same emotional wavelength. And I know that that's always been something that's been a little bit of a challenge for me. And I guess I'm curious, is that something that you find that you have to kind of work with your players on? Do they get kind of the roller coaster of emotions, or are they kind of even keel and able to kind of stay on a specific track from day to day?
It's varied from team to team.
Mm,
Uh, some get it and some don't, and I think they've either been taught about that concept or they haven't. Sometimes I'm the first person to tell them this sort of thing. But that's definitely something that is important to us. It's something that we talk about a few times every year just because it naturally comes up in a game or naturally comes up in a practice. And we'll kind of organize some practices early in the season where we have a set of challenges that we need to accomplish, like 3 or 4 things that we need to accomplish before we leave today.
mm-hmm.
Challenging drills, make so many shots in this amount of time, whatever it is. So after we win the first two, we're all excited, like, well, hey, we got 2 more to go, so let's not lose focus. Let's not think we've won the game, because as you can be up or you can be down, you can be tied at half, and the third and fourth quarter could go a totally different way. And you got to stay even keeled. You can't get too high, you can't get too low. So if we kind of model that a few times in practice before we start playing games, then it kind of clicks. It kind of clicks somewhere in that little brain of theirs. It clicks like, hey, we've done this before. I understand what's going on here, and now we can attack it and move forward.
Yeah, and that's, I think, in terms of leading by example, important for us as coaches too. Like, making sure that we are demonstrating that ability to make sure that we're not, living and dying on every shot or every win or every loss. I think that does a big disservice and is really can be really harmful, because I know it had been for me, especially when I was really young coaching, that my players would basically follow my like emotions, and wherever I was at was going to be where they were at. And I think for me as a coach, that was something I had to learn really quick in terms of my own leadership, is that, if I'm a huge roller coaster, they're going to be a roller coaster. And at that point I can't really get upset at them for, being up and down emotionally if I'm the same way.
Yeah, and there's another coaching adage, like the team takes on the identity of the coach, kind of, which I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but I think there is some truth behind it. And I was lucky to have been taught kind of what you just mentioned pretty early by my high school coach, by my junior college coach. So I kind of learned it young, like
Mm,
you got to stay even keeled. People are going to make shots. People are going to miss shots. Focusing on the next play is crucial. Just whatever happened, whether it's negative or positive, you got another play. You got another play. You got another play. We talk about win. WIN. It stands for what's important now. Hey, you might have just missed a wide open layup, but now you're on defense. Are you gonna pout and be all upset, or are you gonna play and try and get a stop, try and get a deflection, try and take a charge? You just made a huge shot to tie the game, but there's 12 seconds left, and now we need to play defense. So do you think you don't need to play defense now because you hit this big highlight shot? Or so WIN, what's important now? We talk about that a lot, and it kind of is it's along the same lines of just
mm-hmm.
staying in the moment, staying even keeled, not getting too high, not getting too low. And that's something that's an acronym that's been really popular with the team the last couple of years.
And I just wrote it down. I'm probably going to steal it. So just
There
giving
you
you a fair
go.
warning that that might be in my vocabulary these coming weeks. So
Yeah, go
I'll get all
for it. Go
credit for
for
it.
it. I stole it from somebody else who
That's
probably stole it from somebody else who probably stole it from Amanda
is
Butler. So
isn't that just great coaching though? We all just take
yeah,
stuff. We all right? Like we're all just taking
exactly.
stuff from each other.
Exactly.
Where does leadership come into play when it comes into executing offensively and defensively correctly. So I'll kind of start on the offensive end. So talk about what it is that you like to run on offense, and where do you need your leaders, and where does that leadership kind of manifest itself there?
Offensively, we've done all types of different things offensively. Just again, it kind of varies on personnel. At the places I've coached, we don't necessarily we've had talent, but the system has changed from year to year just because of personnel and the recruiting landscape and transfers and high school kids and all types of different stuff. We ideally would love to do mover blocker. I'm kind of obsessed with it. It's fascinating to me. It's so I think it's kind of different. Uh, but regardless of what a team is running, you got to have a leader know what's going on. Like you got to have somebody that understands the larger concept and what you're trying to accomplish in the offense. And then the same thing for defense.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have somebody that has a good knowledge of it and knows like all five positions, who knows the reads, who knows the spacing, the pace, the timing, then you're going to struggle. And that person needs to be vocal. Ideally, it's the point guard, get everybody in the right spot, get everybody going in the right space and the right timing and that sort of thing. But it doesn't necessarily need to be the point guard, but you got to have somebody step up and understand what's going on. And that's a tall task because they got to be a coach on the floor. They got to have watched the film. They got to have a good understanding of the reads. And it's a lot to ask, but again, those inquisitive people, the curious mind, like I have no problem watching clips after clips after clips of what we're trying to accomplish. And yeah, it's crucial to be successful, especially offensively.
And I just feel that one of the most important things that we as coaches can do, along with absolutely along with what you just said, and it sounds like is important to you as well, is teaching, really being teachers of the game of basketball, and not just putting players in a position where they're kind of robotic and just kind of going through motions without understanding, the why, going back to that of things. But I think it's really essential that if we want our players to lead on the court, they have to have a really, like you mentioned, a really good grasp of basketball, and for them to have that, that requires from us, for coaches, to make sure that we're always teaching and we're always explaining the why behind things. Because if we just if we just tell our players to do stuff without giving that rationale or explaining the reasons behind it, I don't know if we can really expect a lot of leadership from our players if they're always just kind of reacting rather than being allowed to learn and be proactive.
Yeah, I mean, we want to teach them not just plays, but we want to teach them how to play.
Mm-hmm.
At the college level, the scouting is so in depth from other teams that they're going to know our three or four go-to sets. They're going to understand our three or four out of bounds plays, our go-to out of bounds plays. So what's the next read when something breaks down? What do we do next? Uh, so watching film, like drawing it, everybody learns. As coaches, we got to know everybody learns differently. Some people, you can explain it to them and they can do it. Some people need to see it. Some people need to draw it. Some people need to go out and walk through the steps themselves. And that, we learn that about each other in our one-on-one meetings and throughout the course of the season. Hopefully you learn that about your players early so you can best serve them. And it takes time, but it's worth it if you're diligent.
Yeah, and it sounds like definitely on the offensive end, especially, like if you're going to have a lot of choice involved, right? A lot of decision making or a lot of player freedom, then those players really have to be coaches on the court and know everything that's happening and know where everybody's at in order to make the best decision. And on defense, I know that a big part of leadership, of course, is communication and players being able to talk. And I think every coach always wants their players to communicate and talk more. So I have to ask about how communication is kind of built and kind of taught in your program? How do you kind of build their communication skills so that on the defensive end they're working together, they're talking and doing all the stuff that we're hoping that they're doing on the defensive end?
I mean, if I had the right answer to that, then we'd be I'd be in a whole bunch of Hall of Fames, or
Yeah, yeah.
we'd have a couple rings, national championships. That is I mean, that's like the most puzzling question for all coaches. I don't think we do anything necessarily specific. It's just something that we emphasize on a daily basis. We do shell drill every single day. That's just something that
Yeah.
we do. We do variations of it. We'll do a 5-on-4, we'll do a 4-on-4, we'll do 5-on-5, we'll do 6-on-5, we'll do somebody running from the corner. We do all types of different things with shell drill and putting them in different situations, and just emphasizing, like, if we're not communicating, we're not as good as we could be. It's hard enough to defend 5-on-5, and when we're not communicating, it's almost like it's 5-on-3 or 5-on-2 or 5-on-0. If nobody's talking out there, so it's just something that it takes time to build, and I think earning each other's trust, building trust with one another early in the season through team building activities, through team bonding activities, and just let them know the importance of it. It's I don't think I have any quick fix or any specific thing that we do. It's something that we drill into them and emphasize every single day.
And I mean that's kind of it, right? Like you can kind of stress the importance of it and talk about it at the end of the day, right? You got to put them in positions and just kind of see how they do with it, and like you said, just continue to emphasize it over and over and over again. And I think you kind of mentioned, right, the things that you promote, or the things that you prioritize, or the things that your players are going to know are most important. And I'm sure even if your players aren't communicating at the level that you want them to necessarily be, I'm sure they know that it's very important that they're doing it, and I'm sure they know that that's a core value of what you want defensively for your program.
Yeah, they understand it. I think with them transitioning from high school to college, it's just so much faster, and there's
Yeah,
so much going on, that they don't really know what to say, or they get caught up in what they're doing and they forget, like, oh, they just get wrapped up in the speed, and the it's such an adjustment for them. But yeah, it's just a continuous daily thing. They know. It's just
sure.
what getting it to be a habit.
Mm.
That's what it comes down to.
And let me ask, because you brought it up before we hit our concluding segment. You talked about the work that can bring a team together, and kind of even bring out that leadership in terms of some of the team bonding, and maybe some of the off the court stuff that you do. Do you have any good activities or things that you found or been really successful for that team bonding and kind of bringing everyone together?
Yeah, I mean, we don't try and reinvent the wheel. We had a barbecue. We've done team bowling. We've done like a team's giving. We've done a Secret Santa hot cocoa night, Christmas night kind of thing. We're not claiming to be any sort of totally outside the box thinkers. We'll do some things in our study hall room, like a little quiz about people do it probably in high schools and middle school stuff. Like, you got 10 questions, you got to get 10 different people to find the answer to that question, like just random trivia questions. That's when we do early, because it gets people talking and gets people knowing each other. We will do some things where we're opening up with one another a little bit.
Mm.
We call it our hero, our highlight, and our hardship. And we talk about, finding the positives out of a negative situation. Recently, we did one that I just kind of thought of. We were talking about roles and people being a star in their role, and what makes them unique, and what's their unique role on the team. So we printed out these color unicorns, like fill in the color uniform unicorns, and everybody colored their unicorn, and why was their unicorn special to them and how did it represent them? And then we kind of talked about how, each person's different skill set is unique and how that builds into our larger team. And they enjoyed that one because because they got to color in unicorns for 20 minutes. I think that's what they liked.
That's so fun.
Hopefully they understood the larger concept of why each of them is special and how they combine to make something unique themselves. So just a bunch of different things. And I would encourage coaches to not be afraid to try things. And some things might go great. Some things might not go very well. It might depend on the group. It might depend on who you got. And you can try things again after a couple years or yeah, I don't think there's any really right or wrong answer to that.
It's funny you mentioned bowling. I don't think I've ever seen. I joke with my girls sometimes that I think they're more competitive in the bowling alley sometimes than they are in the basketball court. I see them out there bowling or doing some of these things, and that's funny. And those I've also had those moments where I know a lot of teams, they do retreats and they do stuff like that, and they have like these, platforms where players can kind of open up and kind of maybe share some more personal and more heartfelt type things about themselves. And I think what's incredible about that is even in events like that, if you have a team culture that can do that. You actually do see your leaders kind of come out and see those leaders who are kind of like being able to kind of console each other, just kind of like be there for each other sort of thing. And it's such an interesting dynamic to see where that leadership even comes in when you kind of take them out of the basketball court in a different situation, how players will step up even on like a human level in terms of leaders on things. I just always find that very fascinating.
Big time, big time. We spend so much time with one another.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, during these months, it's like 60, 70 hours a week,
There's
it
your
feels
family.
like. Yeah, exactly. So if we're only understanding and knowing each other on the surface, then we're nowhere near maximizing our potential. We're nowhere near becoming as efficient as we could be. So, sometimes it's uncomfortable and it seems a little bit corny sometimes, a little bit cheesy sometimes, but those type of conversations, they really go a long way.
Absolutely. Coach, to wrap up, there's a couple questions that I ask every guest. So I'll go ahead and start with this first one. Thinking back on your coaching career, what is a moment from your coaching career that you experienced, that you went through, that you think our listeners would be able to learn from?
Oh man. There's there's probably there's probably a lot. Let me think. I think I think seeing going I would go to graduation. Go to graduation, whether you're a high school coach, a community college, 2-year school, 4-year school, go to graduation, give them a big hug, hug their mom, hug their dad, be there for them, see the culmination of their hard work. I think people have appreciated. Well, I could be wrong, but I think people have appreciated me
No, they have.
being at graduation. So my thing would be go to graduation. Just go, put on a nice shirt, sit there, clap as loud as you can, do it. Go all in.
Yeah, I mean that's such a just such a fun way to like celebrate your players, right? And celebrate them and oh man, it's very like emotional thing too. And I think it's just such a fun way. I know for in the high school level, right? Like how fun like a graduation is, because of course at a high school level, right, senior night, it gets really like emotional and it's very like heartfelt and obviously that it's its own thing. But then to have graduation, which is so joyous, which is like so celebratory, like I always love having that kind of like one final moment with them as high schoolers where we're in big celebration mode and graduation after, sometimes senior night can be very emotionally charged all over the place. It's just such a fun high note to kind of end at least the high school student coach part, seeing them walk down graduation and being able to talk to them after. I mean, it's just so much fun, and especially I imagine for those players, that you have such these strong relationships. And like you mentioned, you're spending all these hours with them to just kind of see them, conclude that part of their life as just, I mean, that's why we're in this, right?
Yep, you hit the nail on the head. It's a lot of hard work. A lot of people have invested a lot of hours to get them to that point. So being there, I think it goes a long way.
Coach, to wrap up, I give every guest kind of what I call a 60-second soapbox, but I'm not timing you, so don't worry. You are welcome to go over 60 seconds, but it's your platform kind of to get out your final thoughts, a closing message, anything in particular that you want to leave the listeners with. I kind of feel bad because that graduation thing was really great, so I'm going to be kind of putting you on the spot to come up with something else, but I'm going to open up the platform for you, Coach, and you can kind of take it from here.
Geez. Well, I really feel connected to where I'm at and what I'm doing now, coaching at the community college level. Having played at a community college that was very similar to Chandler Gilbert, I understand kind of what these young people are going through and balancing and managing commuting and having the pressure of trying to make it out after a year or 2 years. So I love where I'm at. I love what I do. It's incredibly challenging. There's obstacles coaching here just in terms of from a career standpoint and a professional standpoint, but I really feel like I'm serving a purpose, and I think junior college should be an option that a lot more people do some research on. I think it could be a great option for a lot of young basketball players for a variety of different reasons, no matter what their circumstances are. I think it's a great option. I'm an advocate for it. Of course, I'm a little bit biased because I'm coaching at one and I played at one and recruited heavily from a number of community colleges, especially in California. But yeah, JUCO is something to be looked at. Don't overlook it. And that's all I got.
I mean, I know you're sincere about it because otherwise you wouldn't still be doing it after playing in one. I know if you didn't mean it, you would have gotten out the first chance you could have. But look at you, you're still at that level, and of course, I mean, there's phenomenal basketball going on at that level too. There's just incredible things happening. Awesome, Coach. I really want to thank you for coming on and talking about leadership, talking about things that are happening at your program on a leadership level, all of the stuff about leading by example and all the things that you guys got going on over there. It's really awesome. It's really great. Thank you so much for being able to come on and share some insights about your program, about JUCO and all the things you're doing. Best of luck going forward this season, Coach. And again, really thank you for coming on and spending some time talking to us.
Appreciate you. Appreciate the time. Appreciate the platform. Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.